How's it going? As soon as that talk got done, I heard your voice. That's all I heard in the back. I just hear, woo! I'm not going to scream into the microphone. I know, right? So I'm a meanderer, so I'm going to move around the stage, but luckily I already warned the camera guy, and they told me I can walk around as long as I don't get in front of those monitors, so I should be good. But what we're going to be talking today is about actually composable applications. So you hear a lot of people talking about composable today. We're going to tell you about reality. A little bit about myself, though. As was mentioned, I am the co-founder and CEO of Zephyr Cloud. I have 4 children, so I am good at forking my code. And I have my ByteDance Innovator, so what that means is like Microsoft MVP or Google GED, but for ByteDance, right? So I was actually one of the folks that helped them to open source RSPack. So if you've ever heard of RSPack, Zack Chapple and I actually helped the team to open source that, and actually Netlify was involved too, so some fun stories there. And I'm also on the Modular Federation core team, which is a lot of fun. The guy in the top right picture there, which I can actually highlight, that's Dimitri, who's my other co-founder, and then Zach Jackson right there, who is the other creator of Modular Federation. He's actually the creator of Modular Federation. And that's actually at this guy's conference right here called Render ATL, which is in Atlanta, which is a really good conference if you guys haven't been there. Little bit of a shameless plug. So how did we actually get here, right? Because we didn't have composable software, way back when a lot of us were doing Java or .NET or something like that. We all had these wonderful things that were called monolithic applications. And if you're old like me, you know what this cube is. That is the Borg cube. And you will be assimilated into the monolith. You will enjoy the monolith, and you will have nothing but the monolith. And sometimes your monolith is in PHP. And it is a joy to work in. But the reality is that there was some good size of monoliths, right? They were easy to develop in, air quotes, but they were easy to develop in. It was a known thing. It was fast to develop because it was, everything was right there. But it is incredibly hard to scale monoliths, right? They don't scale horizontal. You can only scale them vertically. You can just get a bigger box, and if you're a DHH, you just go buy a bunch of machines and do what you want to do. And a lot of times, though, you also have a very complex and lengthy release cycle. So there is some bad stuff there, too. But we evolved to have these things called federated applications, which is what we were calling things before we called them composable. And a really cool guy by the name of Michael Gears actually created a book called Micro-Frontends in Action. So if you've never read that book, go read it. There's a website called micro-frontends.org. And he talks about going from something like a monolith to where we eventually evolved and we have a front end and a back end. You have a DevOps team, and this isn't going to be anything unexpected to anybody here. And then we got to the point where we have microservices, right? And most people are stuck right here. And if you think about a lot of stuff that we have in composable, that's what a lot of people were talking about. And now we have the concept of micro front ends. We can start to decompose things a little bit more. We can have a team that's focusing on a vertical slice of functionality that's doing everything from the front end to the back end, all the way to the database. And that's how we're currently decomposing things with micro front ends. But what happens is we keep getting more and more and more micro front ends, where you have organizations like ByteDance that actually have 6,000 micro front ends. You have companies like Best Buy that have 50 micro front ends just for .com. Right? That becomes really, really difficult to manage, and you end up with this Death Star architecture that everyone has seen before, but it's usually referenced for the back end, right? And if you're a Silicon Valley fan like me, it's Death Star, but for the front end. And it's something that we've experienced, and it comes to the pros and cons that we've had for federated applications, right? So we went to federated because we wanted the ease of development. We wanted the ability to do what we want. And what's interesting is that actually became one of the downfalls of federated applications, because everyone started doing whatever they want, right? That becomes a challenge. You lost all the observability you had with the monolith. And because it's framework and bundler agnostic, people started using Vue and Angular and React and just trying to do what they wanted to do. And all of a sudden, you have Next in your application, and you realize it's resume-driven development, right? So there's got to be a better way, right? And so we said, OK, let's take a step back. What is composable? And composable focuses, and this is the canonical example that everyone that's been here has already seen this slide probably 3 million times. Mark Lyons came up with this thing, and Netlify helped create it, right? And it talks about the composability of applications, and a lot of it focuses on the back end, right? How do you compose your APIs? How do you get commerce tools? How do you get all these different parts? And that's composing your application, but they all seem to ignore the front end. It's the only thing that's not decomposed, right? And Netlify has been doing a lot in this space to try and make it better, right? They gave us Netlify Connect that's able to do all these amazing things on the APIs. They talked about it earlier today. And they also have this really easy way to be able to create sites, and it's really fast and it's amazing. But like, what happens when you actually need to create more environments? What happens when you actually need to be able to pull federated remotes from different teams? That's where it becomes a little bit of a challenge, right? That's where sites, leave something to be a little bit desired. So like, how do we actually get to the actually composable stuff, right? And before we could even talk about that, we need to understand, like, how did we get here, right? Because like, we have composability on the back end, right? We went from that monolith to microservices, and that was good for about 5 seconds. Right? Because everyone, like we were talking about earlier, was doing whatever they wanted. So then we said, okay, great, let's give everyone their own little box to be able to encapsulate everything, right? So we're going to put it inside of Docker. That's going to fix everything. Docker's going to be amazing. We're going to be great. And then all of a sudden, you're running 50 Docker containers on your laptop, and it's going burr. So then we said, okay, great, now we need Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is going to make everything awesome. We're going to be able to deploy our cluster anywhere we want, and it's going to be great. But then that didn't quite fit the bill, right? So then we needed a whole suite of tools on top of Kubernetes, but then the same thing happened on the front end, right? We went from the monolithic single-page applications to now we have micro-frontends, and then Zach created this thing called module federation. We're like, okay, great, now we can encapsulate everyone's code. It's going to be amazing. But it didn't quite fit the bill. So then we created something called, so Zach actually created something called Medusa. That was actually the first iteration of a platform that we've been working on. And the goal of it was to just do observability and versioning of micro-frontends. Like, let's see if that can be something. We worked on that for 16 months. It was awesome. Ended up getting enterprise customer on accident, which is a really fun thing to do when you think you're getting attacked, and it turns out someone just turned it on in prod. And then Module Federation 2 came out. And Module Federation 2 gave us a lot of the things that we were looking for around like lifecycle hooks, and actually decoupled us from Webpack and gave us a lot of opportunities to really make Module Federation shine. And then a year ago, we actually started a startup called Zephyr Cloud. And what was really fun about that is it allowed us to approach things a little bit differently and take that composable architecture that we were looking at and begin to apply it to the front end and also to mobile. So now you have teams that are able to decompose their application, version their application, deploy their application in little segments of it, just like you do with microservices, but in a way that's safe and easy to do like Kubernetes, right? So then we took this example, that's the blueprint for Module Federation and micro-frontends. If you've ever gone to microfrontends.org, you'll see this canonical example called the tractor store. It's really good. The slot conversation fits into this. A lot of the federated and composable stuff fits into this because you have teams that are working on these separate parts of the application, right? You have the shell itself that is managing the vast majority of the application. You have the header team that's working on that, and then you have the checkout. And what's really interesting about this is all these teams want to deploy independently. All these teams want to do what they want, whenever they want, and that's great until someone in a different time zone decides to push a federated remote, doesn't tell somebody, production is down, you come in and you said, what happened? Right? Because they just pushed it directly to the edge. And without the ability to understand where that versioning is coming from, things like site rollbacks don't quite fit the bill, right? Because you don't want to roll back everything. Like, everything's not broken, just checkout's broken. That's the only thing that's broken. So how do we go and fix that? So that's where this blueprint comes in, because it shows how you can begin to decompose your application in a way using Module Federation. And then we really want that easy button, right? So we actually worked with Netlify to figure out, okay, how do we bring your own cloud to a SaaS platform so you can connect to any cloud provider you want? How do we begin to take these federated tractor sample applications and then be able to deploy them on Netlify's edge itself, right? No more waiting for a GitHub action to pick something up. How do you save to the edge, right? So we put together this blog about that. So you could actually, it's written by Sean, who's one of the folks at Netlify here, did a really good job working with us putting that article together. And what we did is we have this sample that whenever you hit save, it publishes the next version directly to the edge from your local machine. And you're going to see how fast it is. And what you see on the side here is actually us using a Chrome extension to switch and publish new versions of the application. Live to production directly on the edge. And what's really fun is each of the remotes that you see down here are the independent segments of the application. So you have the header, the checkout, the shell. Each one of them is independently versioned. That gives you the ability to actually compose your application. And what's really fun is that we go and then we visualize how all those things come together, because the thing we lost in the monolith, the observability, right? I don't know who's working what, how these applications actually come together, because React tools don't have a visibility into that, right? They're federated remotes. It gets bootstrapped, module federation's there, and then even with module federation, there's no way to visualize it, right? So we ended up building this visualization that says, okay, here's how these pieces all connect together, and that helps us get a little bit further. But the fun part, and I flew through this talk, the fun part is you can actually see that our upload of that application took 600 milliseconds. The deploy, which adds on top of that, took another 700 milliseconds. So you are going from your local development machine to Netlify Edge in under a second. That is incredibly fast. And where it's really helpful for enterprises is like production goes down, you're losing money, your GitHub, your whoever you, sorry, I was looking at the front. People can't get to their code. You need to be able to roll back one aspect of the platform. You need to be able to bring that merge button back, whatever you're working on. That's sub-second, right? And that's the value of being able to leverage the edge. That's the value of being able to leverage module federation, because you're not going to roll back the entire application, right? That just doesn't happen. So a lot of times you have to roll forward, and that's what you can do with Zephyr. So because of that, we have federated applications that look like a monolith to the end user, that feel like a monolith in the right ways to the developer, because I have the observability again, but has the ability to actually version like a microservice, or version like a micro-frontend, all being able to power on Netlify or any other cloud that you want to use, right? And that's kind of the magic of using module federation for composability for micro-frontends together with Zephyr. And my DMs are open. Feel free to shoot me a message if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Actually awesome.